Welcome, everyone. I'm JP Parham, and I'm a member of the Virtual Education Working Group. Thank you for taking the time to join us today for M4A's fourth webinar of the 2023-2024 school year. We want to thank the M4A leadership for continuing to support the holistic growth of our M4A professionals and to you all for investing in your own development. Today's webinar is entitled Forward Momentum, Navigating NCAA Updates in Academics and Student Athlete Development. Today, we are joined by Kaylin Overway, Katie York, Morgan Adcock, and Amanda Conklin from the NCAA to share changes and considerations for the upcoming year in the areas of academic support and student athlete development. Following this presentation, members of the Virtual Education Working Group, including Karina Barantes, Liberty Bracken, Rachel Rodriguez, and Zach Reed will lead the question and answer sessions with the NCAA presenters. Participants will have the opportunity to join one of the two breakout rooms for the question and answer portion, specific to academics and student athlete development. Now, I will turn it over to our friends at the NCAA to get us started.
Thanks, JP. So I just want to start by introducing myself, and we'll have the rest of the NCAA staff introduce themselves as well before we get started. My name is Kaylin Overway. I am an assistant director on the high school review team in the Eligibility Center. I'm going to pass it off to Amanda.
Hello, everyone. Amanda Conklin. I am the Managing Director of Division I Governance, and I've been at the NCAA. I'm in my 16th year now. Very happy to be with you all today.
I'm Katie York, and I work in Academic and Membership Affairs at the NCAA, and also happy to be with you today.
And I'm Morgan Adcock. I am also in the Eligibility Center. So Caitlin and I come from the same unit, and looking forward to being here. I've been with the NCAA for about 11 years.
All right, thanks everyone. So we'll go ahead and get started. Just a quick agenda. We've got the Eligibility Center updates, then we'll move into Division I academic updates, as well as transfer updates, and then student athlete development attestation information. And then we'll do those breakout rooms where we can ask questions. And if there's time, we can do questions as a big group and then do the breakout rooms. All right. So like we said, starting with those Eligibility Center updates. So at the 2024 convention, the big piece that was a change as far as academics for the Eligibility Center is that we eliminated the separate legislative standard for non-traditional core courses. So if you're aware, student athletes at the high school level would have to have each program reviewed. So if it's a traditional classroom-based program, it had one set of legislation. And if it was a non-traditional, so online, blended, independent study, distance learning, hybrid, and as well as similar means, all of those options were reviewed under a separate set of legislation. So this year at convention, it was voted to eliminate that separate set of legislation and just create one piece of legislation that will be used to evaluate all reviews. So all of the programs will continue to get reviewed, whether that's the classroom setting or online independent study, et cetera. Those will still get reviewed to the same level of care. But we are working to provide that detailed criteria for staff reviews of the high school account programs and courses. So those are being developed. We haven't fully developed those yet, but we're anticipating that here soon. And then in the high school review committees, policies and procedures, that's updated annually and is approved by the Division I Committee on Academics and the Division II Academic Requirements Committee. So they will do the final approval of the criteria for review that will be used in combination with that legislation to review all of the different educational models that are being used at the high school level. So then some strategic initiatives that are being done at the Eligibility Center. Just the first one that I think you all will hopefully be really excited about is the academic certification clarity. So this is being done to more easily provide prospective student athletes with understandable guidance about their academic certification in comparison to the legislated requirements. Basically, it's taking that information and clearly telling the student athlete what is still missing from their academic certification and what courses they still need to complete. Another thing that we've done recently is duplicative accounts. We've improved the process to better mitigate PSAs creating multiple accounts. So that way, hopefully there's only one of those student athlete accounts and it's easier to kind of find them within the system. And then we've currently started working on an international pilot program by working with international schools and other education entities such as ministries of education with the goal of getting international student documentation earlier in the certification process. And currently we know that the membership survey just closed and we are in the current process of reviewing that feedback to prioritize our next updates. And then just a shout out, we do have an open vice president position that's currently posted. So is with you all being in the academic space, if that's something that you're interested in, we encourage you to check that out. All right, I'm going to pass it over to Katie.
Thank you, Kaylin. I am going to start, if you want to click forward one slide, with just some celebratory slides. We're celebrating academic success with the latest graduation success rate information. These numbers were released in December, and Division I student athletes are currently graduating at 91%. If you want to click one more slide forward. You can also see here the progress that's been made by several student athlete groups since 2002. So we're really excited to share that progress that we're seeing. Want to go forward another slide? We do want to make a couple of points about the number of additional student athletes who have graduated that we believe is directly tied to the Academic Performance Program, or the APP. In the past 20 years, over 23,000 student athletes have come back to their institution after leaving to complete their degree requirements. We have some breakdown there by sport, but we feel that this is directly attributed to the Academic Performance Program and the motivation that is created by the delayed graduation point, which is an element of the APR, or the academic progress rate. I'm going to click forward one more. Here we've got our latest information on the APR. This is data that came out last May, so we're still kind of in our APR season, if you will. But you can see that as of last year, the overall rate across all sports was 984. We have some progress in men's and women's basketball, or men's basketball, a little bit of a drop in football and women's basketball, and baseball is sitting steady. But that overall rate is up one point. I'm going to go forward one more slide. I was also told that we wanted to share some information with you about the Committee on Academics. And just to get people up to speed on what that committee does and what its role is within the Division I academic sort of world. So this is the group that has jurisdiction, if you will, over Bylaw 14 and the Academic Performance Program. They are, the composition information is there in front of you, but this group of 20 folks is then split out into 3 subcommittees. They have responsibilities from everything from Bylaw 14 interpretations and our Bylaw 14 waiver directives. So those are the waivers for the progress toward degree waivers or waivers for 2-4 transfers. Then another subcommittee works specifically with APP data collection and adjustments. And then we have a subcommittee that has responsibility for APP penalties, and they hear waiver appeals when a team is in a penalty situation or that team has lost access to postseason. So hopefully that helps you just have some general understanding about that, the way that committee works. If you want to go forward one more. I think the strategic priorities are helpful in terms of what the committee is sort of working on right now. They continue to monitor transfer activity as well as NIL activity, and they're specifically looking at that impact on student athlete academic performance. They are also doing a little bit of a deep dive into postgraduates within the Division I legislation and also within the Academic Performance Program. And they'll be doing some evaluating this year of the academic-based revenue distribution, or the academic unit, which is in their responsibility as well. They have to take a look at that periodically and just make sure that that program is still functioning appropriately. Go ahead and click forward. We do have a restart of the APP operations. I think everyone is aware of this. There was a lot of announcements leading up to this, but this is the year in the spring of 24 that we will see a list of penalized teams or teams that might have loss of access to postseason during the 24-25 academic year. We are still in, like, as I said, sort of our APP season. So the staff is actively working on waiver requests related to penalties and loss of postseason. The top 10 recognition will come back for the first time since the pandemic pause. However, instead of being a individualized letter or email that goes out to each institution, we'll be using a searchable database for that instead, starting this year. Go ahead and go forward one more. I'm going to change gears here and just talk a little bit about transfers. Just because that is a hot topic, four-year transfers. I'm sure everyone's aware that there was an injunction in December of 2023, which essentially paused the application of 14551, which is the year in residence for four-year transfers. The staff has put out a number of resources on ncaa.org, including an FAQ that can be accessed by going to the transfer page on ncaa.org. There's also just some general information about transfer there. But I think the key thing to be aware of is that we do have a transfer advisory panel that is working right now on a pretty tight timeline. 3 members of the Committee on Academics are serving on that panel. Their hope is that they'll be able to provide some direction to the board by the time they meet in April. So we certainly will hope for some clarity on our transfer world going into the 24-25 academic year, by April or hopefully maybe early May. I want to click one more. The other point that we just wanted to make sure that people were tracking on is that there are some things that were not impacted by the injunction. So in these are the sort of things that have stayed the same. The academic requirements for transfers have not been impacted by that injunction. They are still as they are legislated. Similarly, mid-year transfer legislation is exactly as it was before. So that was for students making that transfer in January. And then postgraduate transfer legislation has not changed. But we want to be sure that people understand that these elements are part of what the transfer advisory panel is looking at. So there could be some changes down the road. Please rest assured that we will be putting together educational materials and making sure that we have that available to the membership so that you know as quickly as we can get it out to you what the new landscape will look like. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Amanda Conklin.
Thanks so much, Katie. Wanted to take a moment today to touch on the student athlete development attestations. Morgan and I are going to tag team here, and so he's going to get more into the nitty-gritty details of how attestations work and when they're completed and things like that. But we thought it was important to share a little bit of history about how we arrived at using attestations, especially as it relates to the work in your areas with student athlete development, academics, and the like. So we have had 3 attestations in place at the NCAA for some time. So this is not a new model to us. We've had an attestation, an annual compliance attestation, a sexual violence prevention education attestation. Some of you may have been involved with that previously. And then a diversity, equity, inclusion review attestation that's due once every 4 years that came online most recently. So it is a model that has been in place for some time, so not entirely new. But we do have several new attestations that will be coming online. Most of them in August will be effective August 1 of 2024. Morgan can talk to you about when you'll be actually attesting to those things that are effective at that time. But we also have one related to coaches education that comes online a bit later, August 1 of 2025. So where did these attestations come from? What's the point? Why do we have them? All of the new attestations emerged from the work of the Transformation Committee. And one of the major focal points of the Transformation Committee was looking at how we can better serve the 21st century student athlete. So a focus on the services that we provide them and the benefits that are available to them on campus. So you'll note many of the attestations that are coming online are related to things like student athlete development, education, life skills, career counseling, most of those were a part of the student athlete holistic model. So you may have heard mention of that model previously. That is where most of the attestations came from. And the goal here was to establish a minimum standard for institutions without being too prescriptive. So attestations, most of them you'll see, we're still working on language related to the attestation specifically, but they were designed to allow some institutional flexibility to determine what works best on your campus, what's most beneficial to your student athletes, but still underscores the importance of having these services available to student athletes. So ideally each year, when you go through the attestation process, when your institution completes that, that is a designated point in time for you all to have conversations on campus about what you're doing in these spaces, how you're serving student athletes, and then ultimately preparing yourselves to attest to the availability of these services. So there is good rationale there. It's purposely flexible, and again, designed to make sure that we continue to highlight those things that are really important values of the association. So Morgan, I'll turn to you to talk through more of the X's and O's of attestations and how this all works.
Sounds good. Thanks, Amanda. And Kaylin, if you'll advance to the next slide, I think we win the award for most words on a slide with this one. But we wanted to try to give you the full picture of what attestations look like. So it's important to note anything that is shaded means it is in the future, and anything that is not shaded means an existing attestation. So Amanda spoke to the attestation of compliance, the DEIB attestation, and the sexual violence prevention attestation. All of those are in play now. The other 7 will be coming in the near future. The next column talks about which division this applies to. So you'll notice Division 1 is listed in every row. Division 2 and 3 is mentioned in row 3 under sexual violence prevention. The other thing of note in terms of division, if you are a Division 2 or Division 3 institution and you sponsor a Division 1 sport, you do need to complete the attestation of compliance as well. Column 3 talks about the legislation or policy where the attestation came from. And then column 4 talks about who has to sign each attestation. So you'll notice president or chancellor and AD is the common theme in that column. We do add Title IX coordinator in the sexual violence prevention attestation, and then several TBDs in the shaded portion. So those are some of the details that are still being worked out in terms of the attestations to come. Frequency is important. You'll notice that annual is listed in most of those cells, but some do have an every 4-year requirement. Probably worth noting too, we are still working through what it's going to look like in terms of when and how those attestations will be attested to that have an every 4-year cadence. So more to come on the specifics of that portion of it. And then in the far right column, just a couple of things to take note of. One is DEIB has a conference requirement in addition to a institutional requirement. So wanted to make sure that we mentioned that. And then Amanda referenced the timing aspect of this. And I think this is an important one for you to understand. So for the top 3 that are already in play, those 3 policies should be complied with in this current 23-24 academic year. And then your institution would attest to having complied with the policy in the fall of 24, likely an early November 24 deadline in terms of when you would attest to that. August 24, we add 6 new attestations for Division 1. So that would mean for the 24-25 academic year, there would then be 9 attestations in play. Again, that would mean you would need to comply with those 9 during the 24-25 academic year. And then you would attest to having been compliant with those 9 in the fall of 25. Again, likely an early November 25 deadline on that. And then the last one is the coach's education attestation. That one will come online in August of 25. So at that point for the 25-26 academic year, all attestations would be in play. you would need to comply with those 10 during the 25-26 academic year. And the attestation would be due, again, likely in November of 26. So that's a bit of a look overall at which attestations are out there, who has to sign them, when they have to be completed. Again, one thing that we got a number of questions on during this year's attestation season was the applying the attestation the year after you've actually done the requirements of the policy. So we wanted to make sure that we hit on that one. One other item of note, last year and this year, the attestations lived in the NCAA learning portal. So that is that's the where in terms of if your AD or your president or your chancellor was completing an attestation, that is where they would have done that. One of the things that we're working on, and Kaylin, if you'll go to the next slide, this is the question that we're answering here. In terms of how we can help you, we've heard a lot of feedback from our membership on what we can do here. We have listened. We are working hard to try to do the best we can to make the process more simple, more easy, more efficient for you on campus. So I think that's the biggest thing we can do, is just trying to be overly mindful of listening well and being responsive to that feedback. Kaylin is going to put a link in our chat that is the landing page for all things attestation. This is a great place for you to go to just keep track of what's happening with attestations. Anything new to come will be posted on this landing page as well. I think it's the most comprehensive place that we have for you to see everything related to attestations. And that's a great segue to how you can help us. First off, it's great that you even asked us to come and that you wanted to learn more about this. So that's a big deal, and we appreciate that. I think just you being aware of attestations and how they work is a big deal. I think that helps you support everyone else on your campus to make sure that these 10 policies that we've outlined are being complied to. And then in addition, hopefully each fall, when it actually comes to completing the attestation, that by you knowing a bit more about how this process works, maybe you can be supportive as well of your president and chancellor and AD as it comes to actually completing the attestations each fall. So I think those were the main things that I wanted to cover in terms of just sort of the nuts and bolts of how attestations work. And so I will pass it back to Emily to take on some questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Morgan and Amanda and Kaylin and Katie. I really appreciate that y'all were willing to come on here and share with our membership today some really important information and all of your insights to be able to just know more about what's going on and how we can better support our student athletes. So thank you so much. At this time, we're going to open the breakout rooms for the Q&A portion of this session. Rachel Rodriguez and I will join Morgan and Amanda in the Student Athlete Development Focused breakout room. And Zach Reed and Liberty Bracken will join Kaylin and Katie in the Academic Focused breakout room. You may choose whichever area you would like to join. When you're in these breakout rooms, you can submit questions to the presenters via the chat, and one of our facilitators will answer or ask your question to the presenters, or you can raise your hand and unmute. The virtual education team will be helping throughout the entirety of the process. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to one of them in the chat. And we will attempt to answer every question that we can before we reach the top of the hour when the webinar will commence. I am going to now open up our breakout rooms, and you may join them now.